When it comes to Marvel films, there is Marvel and then there's top tier Marvel, at least in my opinion. There are well over 20 different MCU films as well as MCU shows, which I do include in the lineup personally. But not every single MCU installment is top tier in my eyes. Several of them are very medium. There's only a few that I genuinely love, and when I talk about top tier Marvel, I'm talking about films like Thor Ragnarok, series like WandaVision, or Avengers Infinity War, or the first Guardians of the Galaxy. Those are among some of my top few favorite MCU installments to date, and I consider them to be exceptional. And now we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and the biggest question is, where does this movie fall in this gigantic lineup of Marvel films? And I am incredibly happy to report that I consider Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings, to be among the top tier Marvel films that we have gotten. I have to say right from the get-go that the marketing campaign for this movie in particular, I don't think did the movie very many favors. I was very underwhelmed with just about every single trailer for Shang-Chi. There was nothing really about the trailers or the marketing that really got me excited for this movie. It looked kind of like a cookie cutter, by the numbers, factory made Marvel film coming out. And so my expectations were very medium, if not low, quite honestly, going into it. But it's exciting for me to say that I feel like the movie did surpass almost all of my expectations. But that being said, I've heard of several people who didn't feel as excited for this film as other Marvel films, and I feel like the marketing campaign could have something to do with that. Right from the get-go, I need to give this movie tremendous praise for its action set pieces, the scenes, and cinematography. I kid you not, with all of the Marvel MCU installments, shows, and films that we've seen, I feel confident in saying that Shang-Chi gives us some of the best, if not the best, action fight scenes we've ever gotten across all the MCU. Now, I by no means am a martial arts expert by any stretch of the imagination, so I can't look at the martial arts fighting and fighting choreography with a critical eye, but from what I did see as just a general audience viewer watching it on screen, it was beautiful. There were several scenes that felt like it was almost like an operatic dance with how swift and fluid the movements were, and the camera movements, the angles. These action scenes in Shang-Chi felt like something we hadn't seen before in the MCU. It felt new, it felt fresh. It didn't feel like we had seen this 20 other times before. It was beautiful to behold. Even from that standpoint alone, this movie has some stunning, visually stunning moments that are worth seeing this movie alone. And on the big screen, that much more, holy hell. And I do give praise to the director and the script and the writers for really giving us strong character development for almost all significant characters on screen from start to finish. Nothing felt rushed, nothing felt unearned, especially the family dynamics, from father to his children to mother to her children, living up to your own potential while also not letting family history dictate who you are. There are so many layered elements in dealing with relationships in this film. The writers weren't afraid to slow things down. This movie just doesn't throw action scenes at you just to keep you excited. They are there and they're beautiful, but the movie is not afraid to slow things down and really dive into why these characters are the way they are, what drives them, what motivates them, and the biggest thing, why we should care about them. Now, there has been tremendous representation within the MCU as showcased within Black Panther, and we're getting just as important representation now with Shang-Chi and Legend of the Ten Rings. And a parallel that I saw between these two movies is the strong, badass female characters. Black Panther is riddled, if not overflowing, with amazing female characters that almost sometimes overshadow the male characters, if I'm being honest with you. And Shang-Chi is very much the same. There are so many fantastic female characters in this movie that has me so excited to see them again in the future. I'm talking about Awkwafina as Katie. She is arguably the female lead alongside Simu Liu's Shang-Chi. She's hilarious, we already know that, but she's a comic relief without being annoying. She's not just one note. She's not just there for the sake of making a joke. Yes, when she makes a joke, she's fucking great at it, but she brings something special to him and their dynamic and this story. As for other amazing female characters in this show, and I'm sorry if I butcher some of these names, but there is Meng-Er Zhang, who plays Shang-Chi's sister, Xialing, who is badass in this movie. Oh my god, I loved her. You also have Fala Chen, who plays Shang-Chi's mother, Li, and she was just stunning in every single scene she was in. And then, of course, you have Michelle Yeoh, who we've seen many times before, and she was exceptional. Not quite as a larger presence on screen as some of the others in terms of screen time alone, but she also just brought some gravitas to her role. I loved the amount of love that they put into these female characters, and it was a very strong parallel between Shang-Chi and Black Panther when looking at the structure of the characters in that way. The entire cast was excellent all around. There was no weak link, really. There was no character I would have cut. Everyone did an excellent job within their role. Now, Simu Liu as Shang-Chi himself does a very good job. He's not groundbreaking. There are definitely some actors within this movie that I feel like are a little bit more memorable than him in terms of performance. Awkwafina, for example, is probably my favorite character in the entire movie. But that being said, I loved the duo dynamic between he and Awkwafina, who plays his friend Katie. They're very much equals within this film in terms of significance, in terms of support for each other. I honestly would argue that with Awkwafina's more comical, charismatic performance, and Simu Liu is playing a little bit more of the straight man role within Shang-Chi, it's almost kind of like Awkwafina reminded me of like the Jack Sparrow of the relationship, and Shang-Chi is like the Will Turner. They work so well together, and I absolutely love their dynamic, and I love how much they kind of carried this film together. On top of some incredible character development and character building, there is fantastic world building. I love this new world of Shang-Chi that is now being introduced into the MCU that will continue forward into the MCU. I also loved that this film had a little bit more elements of fantasy within it than hardly any other Marvel film, and I loved it personally. If you're not a fantasy person, maybe a couple of those decisions won't really float your boat, but I also love some of the callbacks or parallels to some fantastical elements we've seen within Avatar: The Last Airbender. There's a lot of things where I'm like, wow, that's some amazing airbending we're seeing right there. It was just fun and beautiful to behold, and I felt like it really added a level of richness to the overall world by going a little bit more fantastical within this world and within this movie that sets it apart from many other Marvel films as well. I have a lot of praise for this film, and whatever little minor issues I have really aren't that big. But in terms of pacing, this movie I felt was very strong with its pacing overall. However, I would understand some people's argument that it kind of slows down in the very middle. It's a very, very tight, strong, exciting first act, and the third act is just bonkers out of this world nonstop. And the middle just really slows things down. It might lose some people, but for me, it did not, because it did some necessary, slowed down heavy lifting to build the characters and build the plot in order to set up for a fantastic third act. And I'm glad it sticks the landing for its third act. And you honestly couldn't get that without the middle in getting there and really just building upon your foundation. Now, in talking about the story itself, you know, we have gotten so many superhero origin movies, even outside of the MCU. So many, too many to name. So some people might argue that there are certain plot developments and plot beats that could feel familiar. There's only so many ways we can continue to tell a superhero origin story, but I think this movie did a great job at telling this version of it very well. They didn't just phone it in. They didn't just take our thoughts and feelings for granted and just saying, it's Marvel, it's great no matter what. They did the heavy lifting. They developed these characters. So even though some of these developments and some plot beats won't feel completely original, the actors are still good, the script is still good, it feels heartfelt, and it has that gravity to keep it grounded and feeling relevant. Sure, this movie is not my favorite. It's not in my top 5. It's not better than Thor Ragnarok or WandaVision or Avengers Infinity War. But with over 24, over 25, something like that, there's well over 20 MCU installments. This movie is definitely in my top 10, creeping towards my top 5, even if it's not in my top 5. It's up there for sure. I love that it feels new in so many ways. I love that it gave us so many visually stunning things that we haven't seen in the MCU. It was very well directed, well acted, and I can't wait to explore this world of Shang-Chi even more in the future. I'm going to give Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings an A-. And that's my review of Shang-Chi. I'd be curious to hear what you think, so feel free to leave your comments down below. As always, thank you all again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Ryan Bamey, signing off. Bye everyone.